Ladies and gentlemen, and the others who are here today, I'd like to tell you that I've been asked to say a word or two. I know nothing about this mic. Is it loud enough for you to hear back there? Speak out loud. Okay. I was asked to speak a few words about the origins of this building and how it was funded. And I want to do that partly by giving tribute to a person who has had little recognition or respect for the role that he played, and that was John Ryan. Because he played a massive role in this building, and it's been easy to forget about that, so we're going to finally refer to John several times. John was, for those of you who are more recent to Indiana, John was the president of Indiana University from 1971 to 1987. He was the 14th president of the university. And when I was appointed dean in 1981, he was then the president. And I remember talking to him before accepting the appointment, and he was asking if there was something that he could do for me that might make my tenure more likely to be successful and endurable and so on. And I said, well, there's one thing. I said, the building, the old Wendell W. Wright Education Building we were in, is not a good place to work. And I said, many of the faculty sort of spread out to other buildings and so on, but we need to make that a better building, either dramatically overhaul it or get a new building. And he said, okay, I'll do my best. I understand, and I'll do my best. Now, and so, the point I want to make right now is everybody understands that was the point of conception. I planted the seed. Okay. Now, I never had in mind anything like this. This is beyond my imagination, but that's where the idea began. A year later, I came back to see John and I said, how's the building going? He said, there's been no change at all. There's no chance of it being funded. He said, the country's in a national recession, and the state of Indiana is having trouble paying its bills. So we are in no position to expect a new building soon, and I don't know when it's going to happen. But then he said, I think he regretted this later, but then he said, but if you can find an alternative way for funding the building, I will support you. Now, I think that was intended to be a brush-up. I don't think he ever expected me to come back and ask about the building again. But I took it as a kind of challenge. I thought he was saying to me, I don't have any other ideas except the way we usually do it, but if you have another idea, let's hear it. I'll support it. So I started talking to a lot of people and trying to get ideas about how you fund a brand new building or remodel the old building. And one of the first things I learned from my various conversations was that big funders want big ideas. There was no interest in refunding an existing school of education. That was pretty clear. Now, they said to me, if you have an idea about how the university is going to undertake a new mission because of what you want to do, then we'll pay attention. Or if you have some idea that's going to affect the schools and universities of Indiana, or if you have an idea about having a national impact, we'll pay some attention to that. But otherwise, just leave us alone. So I thought, well, we ought to think about that a little bit. And so I began having meetings with people on campus. One of those was Gene Ferris, who was Dean of Learning Resources at that time. I gather UX is sort of like that, or much bigger than that now, but it was that kind of work. And so Learning Resources were in charge of all the classrooms, of the lecture halls, the classroom, to make sure the faculty had the right equipment for the work. And so I would talk to Gene about the necessity of making this project bigger. And he would say, well, maybe there's something we can do together as an alliance. He needed space for his work, for his people, and so on. So we began to talk about that. And finally, I don't know who was the first to approach it, but someone someday said, wouldn't it be neat if Indiana University would simply build a new building to try to be out in front of everybody else? So as these new technologies come in, as we can see on the horizon, we don't know when we'll get internet, we don't know when we'll get personal computers, but someday we will. Wouldn't it be nice if Indiana were ready to have all those things, and people could come and watch and see how we handle it? They could look to us for advice. Seemed like a good idea. I went for it. And so we said, what do we call this? Well, in Indiana, it used to be at least, there were a lot of things that you didn't know what to do with. You called centers or institutes, like the Kinsey Institute or the Social Studies Development Center. So we just simply called this the Center for Excellence in Education. A lot of people made fun of it on the campus. It seemed to ring pretty well outside the campus. And so we went with the Center for Excellence in Education. We went back to John Ryan, and we said, we think we maybe have found an alternative way of funding the building. We would like to propose the Center for Excellence in Education. He asked us to tell him what the project, what it was about. And I don't really know what he really thought. I think he probably thought at the time, this is a crazy idea, and it's never going to get funded. But I did promise Howard I'd support him, so I better support him. So he said, sounds good to me, let's go for it. And he brought it up with the trustees and began to share it with other people in Bryan Hall, many of whom didn't like the idea very much. But we went ahead. So now we have a Center for Excellence in Education, and we also learned very quickly that funders didn't even want to talk to Howard Milling or Gene Ferris. They wanted to know what the president was interested in. So very quickly, we told John that if this is going to work, you're going to have to use you in some way you're not maybe used to using. One of the first ways, and I remember September 1983, he hosted a breakfast in Washington, D.C. for the Indiana Congressional Delegation. He hosted a breakfast for all the senators and representatives from Indiana and their staffs and said, this is our new project at Indiana University, and we want you to be the first to know about it, and we'll probably be back later to ask for some money. And then 2 weeks later, he held a similar breakfast in Indianapolis, inviting members of the General Assembly, foundation officials, school officials, members of the Robert Orr's cabinet and so on, and persuaded Robert Orr, who was then governor, to host the breakfast. He was officially the host, although I didn't pay for it. And we had a big turnout, and again, the message was, we want all you folks from the other universities, all you people representing school districts in Indiana to know that IU is going to build a building that's going to represent the cutting edge of technology, and when you need advice and help about how you are going to use these future technologies, we're going to be there to help you. So we'd like your support. We also found out that going to see corporations, and we had to have what was called that little days, a high-tech corporation. Today, I suppose that we're trying to do the same thing and talk immediately about Apple, about Amazon, about Google. But in those days, there's IBM and AT&T. And again, John led the delegation. These weren't delegations that I led or that Gene Ferris led. John Ryan led the delegation and told IBM and AT&T why this was an important thing to do. And if you want to be on the cutting edge of technology in the future, or want to make sure your company's on the cutting edge, maybe you'd like to join us to help plan this building. Maybe you'd like to contribute to it. Well, quite frankly, he was pretty far extended for a president of the university when we didn't have anything particularly show behind him. But things began to pay off. And I remember that in October 1986, there was a press conference in Indianapolis, and at that press conference, the governor, Manuel Tobias, John Ryan, perhaps there are others, made a presentation that all these funders had joined together to build this building. There was, I think, $10 million was promised from the Congress, $5 million from the General Assembly, and AT&T had volunteered $7 million. So we had $22 million. Later in December, John Ryan added an additional $8 because he said he had gained some funds from bond retirements, and he now had $8 million he could contribute. So in December 1986, we had $30 million, and the architects from Houston, who had been working here for about a year to design the building, said, well, that will buy you about 150,000 square feet. And that's what the building will be. On January 31st, 1987, John Ryan spent his last day as president of the university. The next day, Tom Ernest became president, and on August 2nd, Tom had his first board of trustees meeting. I was there too, because One of the items on the Board of Trustees' agenda was final approval of the funding and the architecture report for the new building. If they voted in favor of the proposal at the August 2nd meeting, construction could begin immediately thereafter. Well, they got down to the item on the agenda, and Tom said, when they got to the Center for Excellence item, Tom said, excuse me, but I would hope you would table this item, because I'm just learning about this project for the first time. I don't know what it's all about. And so if you'll give me till the next meeting, I'll get informed about it. I'll have a recommendation at the next meeting. Immediately after the trustees meeting, Tom got me aside and said, Howard, I want you to write a brief report of how this began, how it was first conceived, and how we got to this point. And I want you to attach any documents that show commitments made by Indiana University or by the Congress or other funders to this building. And I agreed to do it, and did it in a week or so. On September 30th, 1987, a day I'll never forget because of my very worst at Indiana University in a 35-year tenure. It's a day I remember badly. I was called to Tom's office, and as I went in the door, we didn't have a chance to sit down. He said, Howard, I want to tell you that I admire your skill and your persistence in getting the project this far. But I also want to tell you, if I'd been president, it would never have been allowed. I would never have allowed it. You wouldn't have got started on this project. But he said, now we've got a problem. We got all these funders, and we made commitments to them, so we've got to fund it right away. And I said, well, I don't know what I said. I was terribly disappointed. But basically, Tom trashed the project that time. And what we did was we notified the architect they had to come back and make it smaller. And so it got big enough to be the School of Education. Learning resources were dropped out, and a little bit of space for the Center for Excellence until the AT&T project expired. So all I want to say is, I really don't know how other presidents would behave, like Tom or like John. But my feeling is that there were very few probably willing to take the risks that John Ryan took in that time. And therefore, from my point of view, John Ryan ought to be known as the person who is most essential to the funding of this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. I would now like to invite Don Warren to come up to give a few remarks. Emeritus Dean Don.
You're not the only one that needed help getting up. Yes. My self-assigned job tonight is that of historian. To recall, enlarge, and likely rearrange memory, specifically regarding this building. As the history of the IU School of Education is written across many peaks and valleys. You heard about some of them from Howard. Painful budget cuts and numerous serendipities of new knowledge. The past 30 years will stand out as a cluster of high achievements, few of them exactly predictable, and none guaranteed, including this building. The building, by design, packed with technology, symbolizes and enables the possibilities. I'll try not to be windy. Let's be clear. This building is not a piece of limestone sculpture, a monument of sorts. We have neither simply gazed at it nor passively inhabited it. Rather, we have used and, frankly, argued about spectrum of teaching, service, and research. I don't mean to overstate the point, but suspect that none of the original advanced technology we lauded 30 years ago is still here. That's the thing about even such refined tools. However expertly maintained, they age, wear out, become passé, and wither, teaching us not to let our vision, which is the engine of our mission, turn to dust. This dynamic complexity is the noblest feature of our past 3 decades. Students, staff, and faculty have found and tested new equipment for communication and collaboration. We have redefined place as process, fought over descriptive language and grammars, and worked hard to personalize distant learning. Confronting the siren call of cheerleaders, or this or that fad, we have preferred skepticism. We have invented new areas of study and research, reinvigorated or repurposed existing ones, and borrowed ideas and programs with abandon. It's called stealing. Here tonight is a sample of the world-ranked scholars, determined staff, and adventurous students, young and old, we know as colleagues. They infuse a spirit of innovation, and that's what's key. Some of our peer institutions in what was once called the Big Ten gave up on undergraduate teacher preparation, but we found ways to keep it as a priority alongside master's and doctoral programs, each conditioning the others, if only indirectly. We have maintained the school's long-standing international effort and directed it as needs changed. We continue to reinforce our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion relative to faculty, staff, and students. We have experimented with applications demonstrating the utility and power of the arts, humanities, and sciences, and parsed the findings, underlining IU's educational mission, which includes critique of education itself, a project we are uniquely ready to undertake. Granted, when completed, this building was on the campus's eastern edge and is now surrounded by new construction. We still struggle for policy and budgetary status amid the university's aspirations. These are amazingly diverse and hard-won achievements. The guts, if you will, the vital organs of this building. Internal and external arguments, legitimately heated and important, abet the possibilities. They have proved to be nonlinear and non-binary, complex through and through, even fantastic, inviting artistic imagination. Some smug minds need not apply. And obviously, we are not done yet. I made it.
All right, I now want to introduce Professor Kurt Bach, a professor of Instructional Systems Technology. I have known Kurt ever since I arrived at IUP WPUI back in 1997. He's been a wonderful colleague, mentor, and friend, and I would very much like to welcome you to the podium.
I was on the search committee for Stacy. It wasn't a bad pick, right? I was also a nominator for full professor, so I know her very well. And I also know the deans who speak pretty well as well. I want to say that I wasn't planning to say a couple things at the beginning here, but I'm going to add a couple things. Do get Gerardo's book, A Cuban Refugee Journey to North America. Do get Howard's book, The Best That I Can Recall. Fabulous books. I've bought them for many of my friends. I've given them out, including Stacy. But get anything that Dean Warren has written. You'll increase your vocabulary by 300%. I remember this is the way I was going to end this talk. There were two people you had to meet the first week at Indiana when you came here. One was Bill Sugar, who worked for Bob Ackerman. He took your picture and got in the information kiosk so everyone could look you up to make sure this building was high-tech enough. You know, so yeah, Bill came from out. This is a dear friend. He's now a professor at East Carolina University. And the second person you met was Dean Warren, over in that side, right in front of the library. He brought all the new assistant professors, Joyce Alexander, Kim Metcalf, Elizabeth Bowling, myself, and about 4 others. And he looked at us and he said, "You are the future of each of your disciplines. You are the future leaders." And I said to myself, I couldn't really envision myself to be a future leader in my field. I just want to get tenured, you know? And then I started thinking, if I have 1/10 vocabulary of Don Warren, maybe I have a chance. So ever since then, I've been looking at online thesaurus every night, memorizing all the words that I could possibly learn. I want to thank Don, and I want to thank Gerardo, and I want to thank Howard, in particular Howard, for making me the first fellow for research in the Center for Excellence in Education. We had a lot of great people, BJI, Marty Siegel, Sonny Kirkley. He had the most fabulous people working for him right up there. And he's been a dear friend of mine ever since. I can prove that I was a member of the School of Education since 2000 because I brought my coffee mug. The opening ceremony in March 25th of 1993, I brought all my planners for the 30 years that I've been here. I brought all my grade books. I have brought the chalkboard, which you've seen on display in the wonderful video that Scott put together. Let's give a round of applause for Scott Liskey. He's done a great job in planning this event. When he's not a rock star, he does this kind of stuff. Listen to his music, buy Howard's book, buy Gerardo's book, and listen to Scott's music. I've got many other things inside here. I'll just put this down here, I guess. I've spoken in this place many times, but tonight is one of the most fabulous times to be back here. I want to thank people like Tom Schwant and Pete Klusterman and other colleagues, Dan Hickey, who've been part of my life for a long time. But Tom probably doesn't realize that I know this building better than most people do. Because back when I came here, I didn't sell my house back in West Virginia University. I had to move myself. My whole family was stuck behind in Morgantown. I decided to rent a room with some undergraduate students who like to have strobe lights and parties every night and smoke machines. So I lived in this building. I literally lived in this building. The janitors all knew my name. I knew all the janitors' names. Back when we had janitors actually cleaned rooms every night. As Don Warren would remember, they came every night and cleaned the room. Now once a semester, maybe at that, you know. But yeah, it was if Facebook, if Instagram, if Twitter, and all these tools existed, what I had over in Covenant or Eaton News, the undergrads I was living with, it's been an interesting lot of pictures to post. But anyways, this place was called the Emerald City by our international students. That's what they referred to this building as, the Emerald City. So that makes Howard the Wizard, right? And Martha Nightpost and Elizabeth Bowling, Glenda or Dorothy or whatever, the 3 people who left with me, the two people left with me since 1992 in August. You know, it was a fabulous place here. We would have busloads of people coming to the School of Education to see what's going on in the building. It was, as a new person here, it was just such a wonderful time. The 1990s was such a wonderful time to be at IU, to be in the School of Education at IU at that time. There was no, the Chronicle of Higher Education had a picture of the School of Ed. I read about this before I interviewed. I read about this building oftentimes. I probably could count on my hand the numbers of new schools of ed in the past 30 years that have gotten the Chronicle of Higher Education front cover. This was significant. What Howard did, what others did. Lee even told me about how he had a great left-handed desk, a right-handed desk, and how they had to cut back when they cut some of the budget here and so forth. You know, there are a lot of people dedicated to making this the best facility in the world. And brick and mortar that attracts. Literally. That's why I'm here. And I'm going to tell you just a couple more things, Stacy. I know she wants to get me off here. I can talk forever about this place. You know, and I'm the head of, or the committee, head of the Teaching and Learning with Technology Committee. And you see we got this, Howard's going to come back as the wizard and pull the curtain back when the library's remodeled, you know. And we're focused on improving things here and making it what the vision was like back in 1992 to make it here in the 21st century, right? And a couple of classrooms here are going to be active learning spaces, meditation spaces, and other things. And Stacy's husband and I, Michael Maroney, we've been experimenting over in Woodburn Hall with the Alcove, which is an active learning classroom space during the past year, doing blended learning, what's called high-flex learning, all these kinds of things. But one just doesn't happen to show up in Oz. One needs some influencers along the way to make sure that one shows up in Oz. And I'm glad I showed up in Oz, right? But you see, in January 1992, I was sitting in my office, probably meditating. The students often see me on my desk meditating. And I had a knock on the door, and the knock, and my GA, my grad student, her name is Padma Naduri. And Padma knocks on the door, she says, Kurt, Dr. Bong, Professor Bong, you need to go to Indiana. This is my student telling me to go to Indiana. She said, I just got back from a conference with Tom Duffy, and 5 of his students showing all the stuff that you want to do for online knowledge collaboration, sharing, and knowledge construction. She says, her and I had created a learning center in Wheeling, West Virginia as part of the youth enrichment services called Project Yes. And we were driving 80 miles each way, which is, in West Virginia, it's a 3-hour drive, which at least 2-hour drive in college. She said, you don't have to, you can go to Indiana, you don't have to drive, it's right there in the building. Instead of driving all this way, you should go. I said, Padma, I just applied for a job there. I'm waiting to hear back. A month later, I was in Paris with my wife and the kids, and the kids were stuck. They were being taken care of by my mom and dad. And I called home from Paris after giving my talk. I said, with the little calling cards, right? I said, Dad, how's it going? He says, well, I got a letter from Indiana. Do you want me to open it? I said, Dad, sure, open it. He says, AT&T is providing this funding. You should go. My father worked for AT&T his whole life. And he says, you can be back in the Midwest, you can be closer to homes with the kids, you'd be in the big, I know Wisconsin, right? Back in the Big Ten. I said, Dad, I'll give him that best shot. Well, a couple weeks later, I get a call at night. I'm in Richmond, Indiana. And Jack Cummings calls. He says, how would you like to interview at Indiana University? I said, well, I'm in Richmond, Indiana. He says, come next week. No, I can drive down tomorrow. He says, okay. He says, I'll take you to Yancheng, which is Sunny Palace. I'll buy us lunch. It'll cost us $15 for 2 people. So I drove down to show me P.S. Skinner's house. And I had worked at Indiana University with P.S. Skinner's daughter and son-in-law on either side of my office. They tried not getting me hired in Indiana. They didn't believe in cognitive psychology. It was a useful fiction. Anyhow, so I drove down, I interviewed them. Next week I came back and we had a cookout at Lee Eamon's house, and Larry Brown had another one. Such great people here stretch out their arms to make sure that I would think about coming. And they actually didn't hire me. They hired Joyce Alexander. Then Don found out they had enough money to bring in 2 people. They had a couple people had left, many people left, so they had a 2-for-1 hire. And I was really lucky to get that one. When I got here the first day, I go up the elevator and they're taking the tape off the elevators, right, literally. And a guy comes in the elevator and says, "You're Dr. Blanc, you're doing the psychology of writing stuff. Would you like to be in my dissertation committee?" First day, I said, "I'm going to get a lot of dissertations here." Yeah. He says, "I'm studying Jungian psychology and meditation at night, and expert writers to meditate and do creative writing at midnight and candles." This is a pretty cool place. I really like it. And the second day, I taught an undergraduate course, and they said, I kept getting these emails from Buzz Kirkus in the athletic office. "How's Damon Bailey doing in your class? How's Damon Bailey doing in your class? You're not an Indiana person, you maybe don't know. It took me half a semester to figure out who the heck Damon Bailey was." And I thought he was the star on the baseball team. He was the basketball star for Bobby Knight, and he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as an 8th grader, and how's he doing in your class? And Damon missed the 3rd class, and then you miss a 3rd class, you get a lower grade, and he didn't ask for any special favors. And if you get a C or lower in education, you're kicked out of the school that. And I'd have Bobby Knight coming in my office. It wasn't the way I envisioned things. But Buzz Kirby said, "No, he went up to Notre Dame to play basketball." Oh, thank God. We had an excuse, But yeah. So, anyways, I had an interesting time my first year here, commuting back and forth to West Virginia. But I'm glad that I eventually got all the family to move here and live in Bloomington the past 30 years and work with such a wonderful graduate students that we have. I mean, I have a list. I was going to shout out to many of them. There are hundreds of grad students. Some have visited in the past week, and have come. One of them dropped off his daughter to come to school here. Just the AIs that I had, the TAs that I had at site, as Tom Schwann would probably know, were second to none. We'd have maybe 11 or 13 of them, 12. We'd nominate 7 of them for the outstanding AI award. They're literally that good. This building attracted the top people, whether it's faculty like Dan Hickey coming here in 2005-ish or so, or grad students or faculty. We have attracted, and this place continues to attract, and with Stacy's leadership, it will continue, and with the remodeling of the library and the new innovations that happen. And she's already remodeled 15 buildings, which you work for 15 classrooms, which you work for UITS. This place will continue to be the shining star of all schools of ed in this country. And let us all celebrate Stacy at this point. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, I think it's right. Is Scott here? Oh, he's doing the Wizard of Oz thing.
Ignore the man behind the curtain.
So I just wanted to close us out by just talking about, we've been reflecting on the last 3 years and to look ahead on some of the new things that are happening. And Kurt talked about the library. You can see that it's obviously under construction. Next slide, Scott. So the same thing that's up on the poster board is up on the screen. It's a little bit hard to see, but what this new library renovation will be is, if you remember, the stacks were very high. It was pretty traditional in its layout, and the Learning and Teaching with Technology Committee really gave us guidance on what this project should become. And we have an amazing partner with Christina Jones in the back. She is our education library. And I think Christina is even more excited about this library than I am. Yes. So it's going to have all the things that a modern library should have. The stacks will be shoulder height on me, so you will be able to see the glorious windows and the natural light that's coming in, collaborative spaces for our students, good technology, a makerspace area, a book discussion area, which is really Christina's vision. And so we worked beautifully with the IU libraries and Christine in particular. And this substantial completion will be in November, or actually be December, I think, to open sometime in January. Is that right, Christina?
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So meanwhile, she's got a little nook upstairs, and she's making do, and all of our stuff is over to the ALF at the moment. So, but this is a thrilling project. This was part of what I was doing in my previous role, where I would come and meet with the School of Education, and they wanted to do something, but it wasn't the right time, the funding wasn't there. And then, where's Deb? Where's Deb Ferguson? She's still here. Deb is our Assistant Dean for Finance and Administration. And I said, Deb, I really want to do this. And she said, you know what, I think we can. And so we had, thanks to Mary's great leadership, had gotten money, just money was building over time in our EdUp, which is our general development fund. And we were able to leverage some of those funds and to finally be able to move forward. So a really exciting project that very much needed. It'll help us recruit graduate students, undergraduate students, and so we're very excited about that. Next slide, Scott. Just quickly to finish up, right behind you over there is our existing lounge. It's nice. Well, no, it's not actually. So we are going to renovate it. We are in the process of. There's been an architect and a construction firm that's been hired, and that project will commence shortly. Some of the finishes that you see, so this will be a nice kind of floor plan that will allow for people to come in. There'll be much better coffee, sandwiches, those kinds of things. You know, the vending machine with the coffee cup is probably going to go away. It'll be a very modern, very nice, and it'll be a complement to what we have in the library. And there'll be a glass window from the library that will show the cafe across the hall. So substantial completion on that is expected for November, I believe. So we are moving fast on that one too. And finally, the last one that I just want to highlight, I got word this week that we will be able to do a partial renovation, the part that needs to be renovated, in the Center for Human Growth downstairs. And the Dean's Advisory Board got to walk this space today. And this is a space that's 30 years old. You see the mission for Center for Human Growth. This is what it looks like as you walk in. Our graduate students who are in counseling and psychology said, needs a little love. And it does. It's been 30 years. And so you see Lynn Gilman there. We have, that was the is it one-way mirror, two-way mirror? Where that's how observations took place. We no longer use that. We use digital technology. So we have curtains, we have old spaces, and so it's time to renovate that and to create new opportunity to add school psychology into the mix. I couldn't resist. I told the Dean's Advisory Board today that I took the ugliest possible pictures that I could and put those in front of the provost and said, we really need to do this. And he was convinced. So here we are, and that project will kick off in planning. So what we're going to do is we're going to renovate part of it, and then just recarpet and paint the rest of the area. But we will end up with 4 additional client spaces. And what's also very cool is we will expand the school psychology part of their services. And so there'll be a children's waiting area and services for children, which we have not had to this point. So the next phase of that should be done by next summer. So those are the big projects that I've been working on as we look ahead to the building. So there's other little things you might have noticed, like I really learned paint is hard. Anything that's other than beige is really hard to get. So there's a little bit of color here and there, and some artwork has come into the building, and so forth. So we're getting there. This is a building that I love, and this is my passion. I joke with Basti that she says, I'm really glad you do this. So, and I truly do love it. And so I think that's all I wanted to share for tonight. I want to thank all of you for being here. This was a wonderful celebration. So with that, I'll let you finish up, and thanks for coming.